Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk a bit about Elden Ring Nightreign, and why I want more games like it coming from the gaming industry. Before I start, I'm experimenting with a more loose script. This video is a bit more improvised as I work on my next project, so please enjoy this background footage of Nightreign, of the stream Ratatosker cordially invited me to. Elden Ring Nightreign has tons of problems, and it's not a perfect game. It shamelessly reuses a lot of assets from its predecessor, and it focuses on a quite repetitive 3-day cycle, quite similar to one of the best games ever made. Oh crap, this is the part where I talk about the negatives instead of glazing the game. Yeah, the game has balancing issues. I think Revenant is just a piece of shit. Executor has no clear identity. The roguelike elements are very poor. A lot of the builds are not very interesting or useful. It's better to just grab the strongest thing you come across and never hope for a build. And despite that, Nightreign is so much fun. I got tons of enjoyment out of a relatively low price. I have over 200 hours in the game, and it's gonna probably keep going up after the DLC has released. And that DLC is also pretty reasonably priced. It adds 2 bosses to Nightfarers, which is nearly 25% of the base game, but it also adds a whole new map and changes the existing map, so for $15 that's pretty good. But it goes a bit beyond that. What I really like is how different the gameplay cycle is from everything else From Software has done. It feels like a very experimental title, where a lot of the developers are just flexing out, they're trying new things. The bosses are so different from what we've gotten before. They're some of the best ones we have ever seen from Software. All in all, it feels like a very fresh and different experience. I've been told that this is similar to Risk of Rain, but I've never played that game, and it felt very refreshing. So when it comes to me, that is the biggest selling point for Elden Ring Nightreign. It is a very new experience and very reasonably priced. And then I know what you're gonna say, it's probably, hey, you might want to play more indie games. If you want a cheaper experience that is more reasonably priced and it focuses a lot on being experimental and new and different from the norm, indie games are where you should be looking for. And I agree. But Nightreign offers me something that I feel like most indie games don't, which is a more premium gaming experience. As an example, this is the new Everdark boss, and just look at the presentation. It's so fucking cool. I really struggle to think of an indie game that has this type of presentation. It's just not something a lot of indie studios can afford to do. Which, you know, it's fine for their limitations. Indie studios will generally try to be even more experimental and go for even smaller niches. And that's the coolest part about Elden Ring Nightreign for me. From Software made it thinking it was gonna be a financial disaster. They were betting on losing money on this game. But they thought it was worth it to try to experiment, let the developers try something new, let them grow, let them try different positions such as director, and I really want more of that in the gaming industry. I feel like over time the AAA scene has become an all or nothing burger, which means that most AAA studios are betting so much money on each of their releases. They invest millions of dollars into each of their games, and if they don't sell millions of copies, they're just considered a failure, even if the game is pretty good. But for me as a consumer, it goes a bit beyond that. It means that every single game is trying to appeal to absolutely everyone, and therefore, there are no niches. Almost every studio is trying to go for the broadest appeal possible, which means that the vast majority of experiences we can get today are very similar to each other. And I would really like to let AAA studios experiment, try to get out of their comfort zones, and try to make games that will not appeal to everyone, but will try to capture a very specific niche. As a little example, I absolutely adore Doom Eternal. It's one of my favorite games ever made, it's definitely my favorite shooter ever made. And I wasn't a really big fan of the Dark Ages, but I can appreciate the studio trying to do something different. After all, one of the main appeals is that id Software was trying to do something different. They were not trying to do Doom Eternal again. And I understand where they're coming from, but at the same time when I played Dark Ages, it felt like they were trying to appeal to a broader demographic. They were trying to take away a lot of the friction that made Doom Eternal as cool as it was. So I would have greatly enjoyed if they made a AA version of Doom Eternal. Not something as feature complete, but something that integrates that feeling of player accountability, resource management, multi-target prioritization, and multi-weapon mastery. And yeah, while Dark Ages didn't resonate with me, I'm very glad they tried to do something different. The only issue is that now I'm stuck waiting for a very long time for id Software's next game. And that's the other reason why I want more games like Nightreign. They can be produced a lot quicker. We don't have to wait like 5-10 years for a game like Nightreign to be made. And yeah, well, when I was younger, I could play Metroid Prime, had a great time, and then I would just wait 2 years for Metroid Prime Echoes to come out. Sadly, nowadays that's no longer the case. If you really like a developer, you're gonna be waiting for a very long time for the next product to come out. Now, thankfully for me, I really enjoy From Software, and their development rate seems to be a lot quicker than other studios. A part of me feels like this is because they don't over-prioritize super detailed animation, super high graphics. While I understand that those things are very important and add a lot for a lot of people, I sometimes feel like focusing too much on them is bordering on overkill. And not only that, they also inflate the development costs, and they make the game take an eternity to be made. So because of that, we're left out with products that have a huge cost, take a long time to make, and therefore it's understandable that those that produce them expect them to highly pay off. They're long-term investments. This sadly translates into products that avoid taking risks as much as possible and try to go for the broadest appeal. No players left behind, we need to make something for everyone. And sadly, if you make something for everyone, you're bound to eventually make something that is for nobody. Humans have a lot of different tastes. They have different wants and they look for different experiences. The best thing we can offer is a multitude of options from which they can choose from. This also allows developers to experiment and try to give something to players that they might not even know they want. A good example of this is Elden Ring Nightreign for me. I do not like roguelikes. And Nightreign is essentially a roguelike experience where you run around the map, killing a lot of enemies, getting upgrades, running away from a battle royale circle. If you told me, hey, do you want From Software's next game to be this thing? I would have probably answered, no, I don't want that. But after playing it, I just had a blast, and I'm happy they made it. So all in all, what I want is for developers to try and do more products like Nightreign. Products where they are okay with them potentially failing. And I'm not only talking about this from a creative, artistic standpoint. I'm also talking about this from a more practical standpoint. There is a thing called market segmentation, which is very important for a lot of products. And I feel like the gaming industry has been allowed to ignore that because the medium is still very new. Even though the public is huge, I feel like a lot of video game players still don't really understand all the possible experiences that can be offered to them. And as such, they are very comfortable in very similar experiences. And as developers will start to branch out and offer different experiences, a lot of those consumers will start to group around different niches. And it will be up for the developers to see if they can satisfy those specific needs. That is how we got modern From Software. It used to be a very small Japanese studio, and when they made Demon Souls, Miyazaki tried to appeal to a very hardcore, very specific segment. So much that Sony wasn't really betting on that. And Shuei Yoshida, who was head of Sony at the time, was looking for a more casual, broad market. So when he tried Demon Souls, he said, this was awful, this is a terrible game. And now look at From Software. They recognized a hole in the market that they could satisfy, and now they're huge. And now we have a similar case when it comes to Nightreign. where they were also expecting this game to do poorly, and now they're surprised at how well it did. And it's because they allowed Yoshida, the director, to try to make a game that would appeal to his own sensibilities, and as such tap into an uncontested market. So essentially, I want a gaming landscapes that allows more situations like Demon's Souls to be possible. I want more games like Nightreign that try to push the limits, try to offer more niche experiences for a smaller public, so in that way developers and publishers don't need to put all their eggs on the same basket and can try to appeal to a more specific niche. And because of that, those games won't mean such a heavy investment on the side of the publisher. And in this way, both development costs and time can be reduced, while consumers can be offered more diverse types of experiences for them to choose among. A good example of that this year was Expedition 33. It was pitched to Ubisoft. It would have been a smaller budget game at the company, but Ubisoft just didn't want it to happen. Ubisoft is just looking for the broadest appeal Assassin's Creed imaginable. As such, the Expedition 33 team had to leave Ubisoft and do the game on their own. And look at the great success that it was. A fantastic experience that served a lot of players what they were looking for. Sure, it didn't do Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty numbers, but it didn't really need it to make those numbers since its budget was a lot smaller. So yeah, overall I want developers to make smaller games. Not quite indie, but not fully AAA. Smaller experiences that are more experimental and can try to tap into more parts of the market. I think that everyone will benefit from that. And that is overall the reason why I want more games like Elden Ring Nightreign. That will be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. And either way, thank you very much for watching until the very end.